Hello and happy almost 2026. So my name's Vanya. I'm a spiritual astrologer and embodiment guide from Astro Bloom, and I'm here to give you an overview of some of the key themes astrologically of this really potent shift that we are living in right now. So first of all, going to pull a little tarot card, see what Spirit has to say about the year that we are moving into in 2026. So we have got the Four of Wands here. The Four of Wands is a card that has to do with the sun rising, after a long night. And there is this, there's a lot of greenery in the card. There is a sun coming over the horizon, and there's people celebrating in the distance. There's homes, a path that's laid out, and it seems like this is the light at the end of the tunnel. A lot of us have been through some major, major shifts. In 2025, it was the year of the snake. We had some of these really karmic placements that we've been moving through, the last degrees of Pisces for Saturn and Neptune, which I'll get into. And it feels like we've been completing these major cycles, and we've been moving through a lot of transformation and letting go and shedding the skins and releasing. And so right now, I'm recording this in the last days of 2025. We are in this liminal portal. Winter is a time to integrate, to realign, to reassess, and to incubate so that we can reemerge in the spring. The Gregorian calendar begins on January 1st, but actually nature's calendar begins on the spring equinox on March 21st, and the lunar calendar begins this year on February 17th. So we're actually in this phase right now during Capricorn season where we are building this like structure and stability to move forward. But there is this fire underneath, right? The wands cards are the fire element. And so we're feeling these embers of this new life, this new structure, this new stability emerging, and we're wanting to move towards it, but it's about kind of laying the groundwork right now. And so this actually brings me perfectly into the energy of January because, the beginning of this year, we've got January and February are kind of closing the doors on the past while stoking these embers, stoking this kind of new life that's emerging. We have, first of all, like I said, snake year ending, February 17th, year of the horse, the fire horse is coming in. And the fire horse wants movement. We're also moving into an age of fire and air. There's a lot more movement in 2026 that's going to be asked of us. It's this theme of moving from like dissolution from the water and the earth of, feeling maybe some themes around survival and like struggling with potential like physical security with Uranus, moving through Taurus in the last degrees right now as well. And we're kind of moving into more of like initiation, embodied leadership. We're moving into a lot of Aries energy as both Saturn and Neptune change signs early this year. So Saturn has been in Pisces since 2023, March of 2023, and Neptune has been in Pisces since 2012. So these are big cycles we are completing, and Pisces is all about the end, right? It is the last water sign, or sorry, the last sign in general, and the last water sign. And it's all about endings. It's about returning to source. So this has been a time where two of these outer planets have been asking us, how do you return to your truth, right? To your soul truth? And how do you cultivate faith and trust in the divine, the source that you arise from, despite maybe challenges that you experience on this material plane in this physical body? Saturn and Neptune are quite opposing energies. Saturn is all about the body, structure, rhythm, embodiment, duty work. And Neptune is all about dissolving boundaries. It's about dissolving that containment that Saturn provides and seeks. And in Pisces, especially, this is alluding to like our dreams, the things that we are working on materializing here through that Saturn on this earthly plane. And so it's been really bringing a lot of potentially fog, dissolution, letting go, right? Learning surrender. All of these things have been themes that we've been working through in these last years. And so it's also been a lot about energetic mastery. It's been about understanding how to contain and have sovereignty over our energy. And there's a lot of like energetic cleanup that's been happening as we move through these last degrees of Pisces. So these planets shift into Aries. Neptune goes first, January 26th. And this is where it's going to be for several years now, because it's actually finishing its Neptune and Pisces cycle and it's shifting permanently into Aries. Same with Saturn. Saturn moves into Aries on February 20th, or sorry, February 13th or 14th, depending on your time zone. And then they actually meet in the first degree of Aries at February 20th. So this is right around that lunar year start. So the fire energy comes in hot these first 2 months. But first, I want you to understand that it's still winter, right? And we're going to feel the embers of something arising. And so, how do we cultivate that? Saturn wants commitment, Neptune wants trust. And so I want you to trust your instinct. I want you to think about what is that dream that you're moving towards, and how can you embody moving towards it in a consistent way, even though you might not have full clarity of what the entire path looks like right now. Aries is about moving with instinct. It's about initiating. It's about embodied leadership and initiation. And so this is what's being asked of all of us collectively. But you're going to want to see where Pisces and Aries live in your chart, because this is the area of your chart where you are letting go of something, right? Maybe you're pivoting in some way, the dream that you've been working towards, or maybe something is really coming to fruition right now, right? As Saturn's been moving through Pisces, especially if you have prominent mutable placements, so Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, Sagittarius, since the beginning of 2023, this is this has felt like you've been on a hamster wheel potentially. You've been doing all the work, right? All of the healing, and with Pisces, it's like ancestral healing. It's the Akashic record. It's things that came long before you. You've been doing a lot of work. You've been doing a lot of healing, and it just feels like you haven't really moved forward that much in the material realm. Well, when Aries comes in, when Saturn moves into Aries, when Neptune moves into Aries, this is where we start to see that new life, that new beginning starting to emerge from all the work that you have done. But it requires sacrifice. It requires letting go of patterns, of ways that you maybe use your energy that isn't supportive of your dreams and the things that you were building. So laying the foundations, that card was the perfect entry point into the beginning of this year. And I mean, February is going to be a big month for sure, because we've also got the first solar eclipse happening in Aquarius. Last time we had the nodes in Aquarius and Leo was in 2017, 2018. They were in opposite signs back then, but I want you to think back to what was happening around in your life around then, and this is what we're going to be moving into in this next eclipse season. So first of all, what are eclipses? I've talked about them before on the podcast here. I've talked about the lunar nodes, and I want you to go back to those episodes and revisit. But at a high level, eclipses are when we have the lunar nodes of the moon, or the nodes of fate, aligning with the new or the full moon. And these nodes are significant points of spiritual evolution that point to our collective trajectory and our personal in our own charts. But collectively, we're speaking on a collective level right now. We are moving from the eclipses in Virgo and Pisces that we've had since fall of 2024, and more prominently January 2025, where we have all been learning boundaries, discernment, learning about control versus surrender, dedication versus trust, right? Work, drive versus trust and flow and ease. I have a really potent episode on that called An Invitation into the Tantric, I believe, where I talk about this energy. And it's a good one to revisit now as well, because 2026 is kind of the transitionary year for our eclipses shifting into the signs of Aries and Leo, like I mentioned. So, Aquarius and Leo, like I mentioned. And so our north node is going to be in Aquarius, shifting from Pisces, and our south node is going to be in Leo, shifting from Virgo. So the south node is what we're all collectively raising to the highest vibration. We are being asked to let go of the shadow tendencies. In Virgo, that was all about releasing perfectionism, releasing control, releasing the need to know everything before we move forward. We're also releasing strict boundaries that are too rigid, right? Really rigid ways of seeing things in black or white. And we were moving towards, or we are still moving towards, being led by trust, compassion, oneness, right? Faith, hope, surrender. Not surrender in the like victim kind of, I'm just going to float around kind of energy. Aligned surrender, right? Surrender that is still taking action based on the truth that you feel, that you intuit, the way that you want to feel, moving towards that. And so as we have our first eclipse happening, it's a solar eclipse in Aquarius on February 17th. This is right around the same time that Saturn and Neptune conjunct, which is, that potent new beginning. This is an invitation and a preview of what's to come over the next 18 months. as we move through these eclipses in Aquarius and Leo. Aquarius is the collective. It's the innovator. It's the objective thinker, the rebel, right? And this energy wants community. There's such a focus this year. The one word that keeps coming up for me is like community, connectedness, humanness, right? And we're not just talking about connecting through the ether, connecting through the internet, although Aquarius rules, technology, and this is going to continue to be a part of our lives. But with Pluto also in the mix in Aquarius, Pluto is actually unearthing a lot of the ways that technology has actually made us more disconnected, more disempowered, ways that it's been used maybe unethically, right? And so we're actually being brought back into more heart-led community, heart-led leadership. Leo is the heart. Leo rules the heart and the spine. So it's about like having the courage to be seen. That's the South Node. It wants us to be seen in our individuality and understand that that light that we put out into the universe, that we shine, our unique light is contributing to the whole, and that the whole cannot advance, cannot move forward, cannot progress. We can't build new earth based on inauthenticity. So what we're being asked to do is be authentic and trust that the people that are meant to be in our lives, the communities that are meant to be in our lives, are going to find us through that courageous authenticity and that willingness to be seen. That's scary. Being seen is scary. I get it. So practicing, how do we embody this then? We balance the head with the heart, right? We lean into being our weird selves, right? We try to let go of some of those shadow tendencies of Leo, which are performing that feels inauthentic, seeking external validation. How can you validate yourself? How can you see yourself? Because that's what's important as we move forward and create this new earth. Now, we do have those transitional, like I mentioned, eclipses still happening in Virgo and Pisces. We've got one in March and one at the end of August. There's a full moon eclipse in Virgo on March 3rd. So this is kind of the closing chapter on those themes of the South Node in Virgo that I mentioned, right? What have we learned in terms of our discernment, our ability to move forward, perhaps without having a super concrete plan, but at the same time, having boundaries, having structure, having routine, having that earth element integrated, right? Whenever Virgo's involved, there can also be things around health that come up, right? Routine, habits, etc. And yeah, the biggest thing that I feel here, there's this attention to discernment. How are you using your energy? Are there energy leaks somewhere for you that are not in alignment with what you're calling in? Now, the one thing I also wanted to mention, just going back to that Saturn and Neptune conjunction, is the last time that Saturn and Neptune were conjunct was in Capricorn in 1989. Now, historically, one of the things that I always remember people talk about in 1989, because it's when I was born, is the fall of the Berlin Wall. And so if we think about that, it's like this structure coming down, Saturn, right? And allowing for oneness to emerge again. But this isn't, there's effort required, right? We need to be able to tear down walls and structures that are not aligned with where we are going, that new path, right? This card speaking of the path that we are walking, that we are perhaps initiating in our own lives. That's that Aries energy. Now we're going to fast forward to Uranus moving into Gemini. Happens on April 25th, 26th. And this is quite a change, again, moving into air, right? Both air and fire are yang energies. We've been in a lot of more yin energy with some of these outer planets, most of these outer planets having been in water and earth signs for, the last few years and even decades. Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018, and it moves permanently into Gemini, April 25th. Now, Uranus struggles in Taurus. It is a sign that is the planet that rules Aquarius. So it's at home in air, and it's actually going to do much better in Gemini. It's going to move faster though. So Uranus being really congruent with those themes of Aquarius, awakening, sudden shifts in perception. It rules the nervous system. Uranus and Mercury both rule different elements of the nervous system, and so there's this like kind of lightning bolt awakening energy that lives through Uranus and that gets embodied through Uranus. So Gemini being also connected to the nervous system, connected to the lungs, connected to how we speak, how we express ourselves, our throat chakra. It's our breath, right? It is how we connect to others. Gemini is very much connected and concerned with the local community, our close neighborhoods, our neighbors, our sibling-like relationships, the people that we surround ourselves with kind of every day, right, in our vicinity. And at the same time, Uranus is more, and Aquarius are more connected to the global community, right? And both of these energies have a lot to do with yeah, networks, connections, exchange of ideas, exchange of thoughts that shift our reality, shift our perspective, allow us to unlearn all of the conditioned ways that we've been taught to think and to experience life. In particular, when it comes to, like I said, connection, community, um, expression, words, the ways we talk to ourselves, all of these things. So, as Uranus finishes his transit through the last degrees of Taurus over these first 4 months of 2026, we are being asked to integrate what have we learned about our self worth, our values. Taurus is very much concerned with these themes. It's about physical security, it's about the connection to the body, it's about connection to our resources. Now, resources can be money, possessions, it can be also our body being our resource, our energy being our resource. So it's asking us to integrate the lessons that we've had and the awakenings and the realizations and the downloads that we've had and the shifts that we have had in these areas of our lives. Now, of course, this is going to impact you wherever you have Taurus and later Gemini in your chart, similarly to the eclipses being affecting you wherever you have Virgo and Pisces, Aquarius and Leo. This is why, this is an overall general preview of 2026, and it's going to impact you very personally depending on where these areas are lit up in your own chart, which is why I'm actually offering very limited and for the first time ever sliding scale mini forecast readings, which you can find in the show notes. I believe there's only 5 left as of right now. But yeah, Uranus and Taurus, right? We're integrating all of these downloads, these shifts, this knowledge that we've had of how our beliefs around self-worth and the things that we have learned about what makes us worthy of the things we desire actually creates our reality, right? Because it is our subconscious thoughts and our thought patterns and the way that we speak to ourselves that create our reality. And as we move out of that energy, we're being asked to live from the embodiment of those unearthed truths, of those repatterned beliefs. And we're asked to connect and communicate and express ourselves through that energy. Because Gemini, while Taurus is about that integration within and our relationship to physical security and all things, Gemini is almost the relation to it's our relational security, right? So it's our ability to feel heard, to feel free to express ourselves, and to share our ideas and our thoughts with others. And so this energy of Uranus and Gemini, as it also creates positive aspects later in the year to Pluto and Aquarius, is going to bring a lot of shifts in how we connect, in how we communicate. This is going to impact the world of social media. It's going to impact the world of media in general. And what I'm really sensing is I'm getting this huge craving to be in person with people, to be in community, to have more analog ways of connecting to others. And I think that's the shift that we're awakening to, where we're realizing all of the power that we have given away to the internet, to social media, to building our businesses online, right? There's so much freedom in that, but there's also a giving away of power that happens when we are not actually connecting with people in person. And it actually has made us less human in some ways, right? And so this isn't anti-technology. It's just pro-human. It's pro-real community. It's pro-connection. And that's something I'm definitely going to be building into Astro Bloom this year as I sort of have been in this really liminal space. Most of you know that listen to this podcast. I left a marriage and a whole life back in Ontario in 2024, and 2025 has been a year of completely stripping everything down. And with that, a lot of my in-person offerings and products disappeared, or not disappeared, but were put on hold. And now, as I'm in BC and settling more into a rhythm of cyclical living, I'm bringing a lot of that back. And I'm also bringing back an online community as well, because I think both are really important to maintain through this time that we are moving through and into. So yeah, Earth and Sky is going to be the new online community that I'm super excited to talk to you guys more about, but I will talk about that another time. Just know for now that there is a wait list for you to find out. It starts in March, and I'm really excited about bringing and bridging Earth and Sky to you in a whole new way. Okay, then we have June and July. July is a really heavy, not necessarily energetically heavy month, but just heavy in terms of there's a lot of outer planet hits that happen. We also have the nodes fully shifting into Aquarius and Leo. We have Jupiter entering Leo. It's been in Cancer since June of 2025. And Jupiter has been expanding our emotional intelligence. It's been expanding our ability to feel, um, to nurture ourselves, to heal also the mother wound, to understand our emotional needs as well, to create that security within ourselves. And it's now asking us to, as it moves into Leo, end of June, it asks us to lead from that place again. There's these themes of Leo coming up where we want to allow ourselves to be seen, right? Um, Allow ourselves to lean into the playful expression of the inner child, to see the world through like wonder and optimism and art and creativity and fun. And it wants us to be seen. And so, especially as it connects with the South Node, it can bring up, which happens later on in the year, it can definitely bring up, some fears around being seen. It can bring up some of the shadow elements of the South Node in Leo, which I mentioned before, seeking external validation, performance. And so it can bring up really inauthentic things, but it also highlights authenticity in a big way, right? So this is a time where, especially if you've got placements in Leo, Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, in those fixed signs, you're being asked to let yourself be seen in some way and to have the hope and the courage that when you show up in your authentic nature and in your authenticity, the right people and the right communities and the right opportunities will find you and they will stay. So then mid-July, we have a lot of planets that are slow moving, working together. Some have some tension. First of all, we've got Jupiter making a positive aspect to Neptune. As we also have Jupiter opposing Pluto. So on the Aquarius Leo axis, we have Uranus trining Pluto. And yeah, Jupiter is going to be sextiling trining Neptune because they're both going to be in fire. So that, again, there's a lot of air and fire happening here. Now, because both Neptune and Pluto are being activated and Jupiter, everything kind of gets bigger. And we're looking at themes around, again, courage, having the courage to lead, having the courage to be seen, having the right people around us, the right community around us, and asking ourselves, are we actually leading from this place? Are we leading from the heart or the head? Are we balanced in that? First of all, it's that Aquarius and Leo axis. And July feels like the turning point in some ways. Like the beginning of the year is kind of the embers and like all of these things brewing beneath the surface and the new beginning slowly emerging in the spring and all that. But July feels like the heat of the summer really brings some outer shifts as these planets all align with one another. This is stuff that we don't see very often. We might never see these alignments again in our lives because we're never going to see Pluto in these degrees of Aquarius. We're never going to see Neptune in Aries again in our lives. So these are the touch points of like very big cycles that we're moving through collectively. And for you personally, it's going to be affecting those areas of your chart that are ruled by Leo, Aquarius, and Aries. This is that crux between individuality, embodied leadership, and community, connectedness, making a difference, creating the world that we want to see. And so we're moving from this age of perhaps like spiritual bypass, playing the victim, not really doing the work with that Neptune and Pisces and Saturn and Pisces. And we're moving more into like, who's actually leading by example here? When we look at the spiritual community, are people just talking about the things that they do, or are they actually doing them? And that's going to become quite clear at this time. And people are going to be inspired by those that are actually doing the work, right? Embodying the things that they are talking about and having the courage to allowing themselves to be seen, paving new paths, all of these things. Now, because, Pluto is in the mix too, in a more difficult aspect, there's actually also going to be a grand, or not a grand trine, I meant to say a T-square happening between Jupiter, Pluto, and Chiron moving into Taurus for the first time in years. There is a focus here on understanding, some of the subconscious patterns related to our sense of self-worth and security. So do we hide our authentic self? Do we lean into groupthink? Do we try to kind of blend into the crowd because we're actually afraid that we're not worthy of being seen or that we're not worthy of showing up in the way that we actually want to or that is actually authentic to us? And Taurus, Chiron is the wound of security, it's the wound of self-worth, it's the wound of resources, right? And so there can be things that come up around our physical sense of security at this time and how that is related to perhaps our inability to be authentic or our lack of alignment in our communities and our wider circles in the way that we experience that. So this is kind of just the beginning of that transit of Chiron in Taurus, and it's something that's going to be unraveling, as we move through that in the next few years. So it's just sort of a preview of the energy that's to come there. That's in some ways riding on the Uranus and Taurus awakenings that we've had. Now, again, this is activating a lot of energy for fixed signs. So Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, Scorpio. And then because we've got the Neptune activation as well, we're talking about cardinal signs also. Aries, Libra, Capricorn, and Cancer being the most affected by this energy. But as I always say, you have all that energy in your chart. So it's going to depend on where it's activating things for you as you kind of take a look at your chart and look at those houses and those sign placements. Now, as we move into the fall, there is a Venus retrograde happening. Now, Venus retrogrades are something that I work with quite personally and have been working with for years. And Venus is such a muse for me and a huge energy in my life. Venus retrogrades only happen about every 2.5 years. And this time, the Venus retrograde is happening in Scorpio and Libra. So in the later degrees of Libra and in the earlier degrees of Scorpio. Now, Venus retrograde officially happens between October 3rd and November 13th, but there is a pre and post retrograde shadow period that happens. So we're talking about most of October, pretty much all of November into December. And Venus retrograde is congruent with the myth of Inanna and her descent into the underworld, also with Persephone's descent into the underworld in mythology. And so I have talked about Venus's energy in a previous episode called Venus Initiations. Basically, what happens during Venus retrograde is there is this, feminine energy that descends into the underworld, which is the world of the subconscious, the feminine, the yin, the shadow. And through this descent, there is a loss of false identities, false beliefs, false values that happens. Venus is very much connected to value systems, our connection to love and our connection to money, our connection to our self-worth. It's related to that energy of Taurus. But because she's moving through Scorpio and Libra, this has a lot more to do with our relationships and our patterns around relationships and our patterns around intimacy and allowing ourselves to be seen and to be vulnerable. So as Venus moves into the underworld, she is asking us to look at our subconscious patterns pertaining to truth, intimacy, being able to have difficult, vulnerable conversations with people, being able to allow ourselves to be seen in an effort to build harmonious and balanced relationships. So Venus retrogrades often bring, maybe people from the past, maybe new karmic connections that really allow us to see some of these ways that we have been acting in misalignment potentially with our actual truth, with what is our actual desire, because Venus is connected to what we desire, and desire and fear are also intricately linked. And so Venus's retrograde path is a request. It is an ask for you to look at your desire and look at what you truly desire and how there's perhaps fear, blocks, barriers that prevent you from moving towards that desire that live in that subconscious, right? And so as Venus moves back up through into the light, comes out of her retrograde, she asks us to integrate the truth of our desires and to live from that place and to show up in our relationships, in our intimacy from that place. And this is work that has to do with integrating that aspect of ourselves so that it can be mirrored to us through relationship. It's about doing the self-awareness work, right? Because we're talking about the shadow realm. We're talking about integrating one's shadow, understanding our subconscious patterns and how that affects our romantic relationships. This can also be connected to shared resources, shared energy. Scorpio rules intimacy, shared energy, shared resources. And so it's asking us to look at that. How do we share our life force, our sexual or creative energy? And is that in alignment with the kind of intimacy and the kind of relationships that we want to cultivate in our lives? So really, really big energy to finish off the year, really focused on relationships, on self-worth, on values, on truth, on intimacy, on repair. And this is something I'm going to intentionally be bringing into Astro Bloom in this next year by doing a group journey centered around this energy, because I think Venus is such an important energy to integrate into our lives. There's a lot of relationship focus in 2026 where we are being asked to really align ourselves to the type of unions that we desire. And so it's an important one to move through, I think, collectively and be aware of. One other thing I'll mention really briefly is Mercury retrogrades have been happening in fire signs in 2025. And so this has been a lot of reassessment around like, how do we take action? How do we trust our instinct? How do we move forward? In 2026, Mercury retrogrades are happening in the water signs. And so this is more about our emotional intelligence, our ability to feel, our connection to our intuition. Mercury is the messenger god. So he connects all of the different realms, heaven, earth, cosmos, and the underworld. And so in his watery retrogrades, he's really asking us to look at how do we perhaps receive messages from these realms through our emotional body, right? Our somatic body, our intuitive body, our intuition, our connection to feeling. So with that, I will finish this 2026 forecast and yeah, just remind you that, there is so much fresh energy coming in 2026. It's definitely going to be very different from 2025. 2025 was it was a 9 year, it was a snake year. It's all about completion and release, letting go, clearing space, right? Shedding the skin. And if you're listening to this, in the first 2 months of 2026, we're still shedding some things because the lunar new year and the year of the horse hasn't started yet. But as we move into February, particularly, then, April, July, end of the year, the momentum and the air and the fire is going to pick up. The new beginnings will emerge. Just stay the course, stay committed, keep fanning those embers of the new life that you're envisioning. And most of all, stay courageous and faith and hopeful and lead from the heart. Lots of love.